good morning. Welcome
How you
to
doing?
Natural Capital Conversations with Ben and Benjamin, also known as B Squared. Benjamin, do you know there's a saying in Hollywood and in the theatre community that
What?
goes, never work with children, animals, or Ben and Benjamin? I
Well,
think,
Ben and Benjamin would make sense. I think we give everyone around us a lack of hair because they have
yeah,
to work with us, so they fundamentally
yes.
lose joy and rapture.
Oh, don't even start me on Rapture this week.
Well,
Um,
it's been delayed. It's still coming. Don't
well,
worry, it's still coming. It's just
I'm
delayed.
I'm waiting. It's going to be interesting the ratios we can express the rapture in around natural capital. But anyway, let's stop having fun and get on to today's topic, which I think today we're going to talk about carbon and also electrification, which kind of go hand in hand, but are a bit different in some ways.
It's really fascinating how, because renewable energy has gotten so cheap so quickly, that carbon and electrification have fundamentally completely diverged for our industry.
Cool. So it should make for a
You,
good conversation. Shall we
it'll
start
make
with
for
carbon? See,
yeah.
carbon's like the natural capital du jour. There's so many people around the industry who are, for the last few years, have been so focused on carbon reduction and counting our carbon and figuring out is it scope one, two, or three. But my question to you is, do you think that's really the biggest issue we face in terms of natural capital consumption as the mining industry?
No. But I think it is the biggest social license to operate from a capital perspective we face. So I
Ooh,
think one of the things that we as an industry do is we're very focused on what our money cares about because we're fundamentally broke. And the problem with being broke is you care about what the person who writes the check. You watch the person with the checkbook really closely. And the checkbooks don't really understand our industry. So they judge us purely based on carbon because carbon is the easiest way to judge if we're good or bad corporate citizens. And the reality is, carbon is not our primary focus. Carbon is something we help solve. It isn't necessarily something that we should be working on solving for ourselves. We are using a lot of energy right now that could be used to massively shift the green transition, chasing phantom goals that don't actually make us any greener.
did you just say we're using a lot of energy to reduce carbon?
Emotional, physical, financial.
It
The
was a
number the number of times I've gone into meetings and people saying, "Oh, we have to get our carbon footprint down. We have to do this, we have to do that." And they don't even know if they're trying to do it per ton of metal or for total mine operations or per ton of ore. They haven't really thought through what that means. They just emotionally, desperately want to reduce the carbon footprint to make whoever is judging them happy.
Yeah. No, I get that. I get that. We want to please, and we definitely want investment in the industry. So I see why we've followed that trend. But let's talk more about rather than getting the carbon down, let's talk. Perhaps we can. Well, I know you and I have had these discussions in the past. Let's talk about the impact as a industry we can have on the world's carbon.
So, mining is the solution for both scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions across most industries.
Okay. I
And what
like
I mean by
I like
what
that. I like that. That's kind of catchy. Mining is the solution.
mining is a solution. So let's even start with the simplest one, zinc.
Okay, elaborate.
As you know, I'm funded until the end of the year by the Zinc International Zinc Association,
Lovely.
and they paid me to look at what does zinc do on carbon. You
Yep.
galvanize a piece of rebar, you put it in the bridge, and for every ton of zinc, you probably save in the order of magnitude of 700 to 1,500 tons of carbon emissions over the life of that rebar because you're deferring the rebuilding of the bridge from the cement. You're deferring a whole bunch of capital stuff. You're deferring all of the construction crews and everything else. You know how long things are shut down when a freeway goes out. You live in Denver, where
Yes.
basically every other freeway shut down every other week. You know exactly what it's worth to make these things last slightly longer. So what I'm saying is if you look at metals in use fundamentally either give us longevity or they give us access to cheap, clean energy. Longevity is scope 1 and scope 3 emissions. Cheap energy is scope 2 emissions. So metals in use are far more important than the footprint we use to make the metals.
So in that case, once again, it comes back to some of the discussion last week. If we're getting more benefit for the energy transition and also carbon reduction globally by making more metals and using them appropriately, shouldn't the shouldn't we be encouraging maximum recovery of metals?
We should be encouraging maximum recovery for a whole bunch of other reasons, not the least of which is we don't have toxic stuff going behind tailings dams.
Mm,
I mean, our metals that we get out of our mines tend to be in complicated sulfides with a bit of arsenic, a bit of this and a bit of that attached to them. We want as much of that toxic stuff not going into a tailings dam. An inert tailings dam that's got no sulfides in it is not that dangerous for thousands of years. A tailings dam that's got 1 or 2% sulfides behind it is something that fundamentally needs to be actively managed for the rest of time.
okay. So another reason to encourage recovery, but also I think it leads into if we need to use a little bit more energy, perhaps to get our recovery up and to maximize that metal production, that's not a bad thing.
It's a lovely thing because our carbon footprint actually goes down when we use more energy.
As
So
long
if
as we
we,
scope it out and look at the long term rather than the short term, what's next quarter's carbon emission report look like?
well, let's work through this from two perspectives.
Okay.
The first one is not all energy is created equal in an operation. So if I'm going to be running a mine and I have the choice to use time of day energy versus 24-hour day energy, I end up with a very different energy footprint. Every mine today should go back to either FLS or Mezzo or Larox, don't really care which of the vendors they go to, and buy another 3 sets of concentrate filter presses. Okay? They should have 3 times the concentrate filter capacity they currently have.
Yeah.
And then they should only run it when solar is cheap. If you fundamentally take the concentrate filter presses and you run them only when solar is cheap, you gain 2 things. You gain a massively lower carbon footprint per ton of concentrate because a concentrate filter press run when solar is cheap, both the air and the compression is a lot cheaper. Those kilowatts from a carbon perspective go
Yep.
way, way down.
Yep.
And you end up with far better concentrate production, which reduces carbon all the way down the line because you're going to be way more in spec because you have excess capacity. So the simplest way to decarbonize a mine is look at every place where you have a natural battery, whether it be concentrate filter presses, whether it be inside your thickener, whether it be inside how you run your crushing. Go through all the natural batteries in a mine and fundamentally make sure that you maximize them because all those natural batteries are so much cheaper than buying a lithium ion battery.
Yep. And as we've discussed, a lot of those you mentioned crushing, you mentioned other processes that can be batched. Stock tanks, stockpiles are natural batteries.
Yep.
And you make the filter press point, and I've seen this, and this before the energy saving and green argument and reduction of carbon emissions was a thing. I used to work at a mine in Ireland, and we got vastly different power rates for running our filter presses in the middle of the night. Fortunately, we had excess capacity, and that's what we did. We just ran them at night, which saved a fortune in operating cost because we could then just buy the cheap energy.
And cheap energy is a lovely thing to buy. So that's
Yep.
door number one.
Yep.
Door number two is don't be energy cheap. Okay. I wear yellow glasses because I started off as a non-pragmatic environmentalist.
Oh, okay.
So I used to keep my house super cold at night because I felt that was a really good energy trade. When I started being an environmentalist about 2018, 2019, that range, I made the decision the house was never going to be over 56 degrees at night. That was lovely until I got up one night, went to the bathroom, and fainted because I was so cold. That one trying to save silly savings, which was not that much of a carbon footprint, ended up costing me migraines for the next 7 years.
Mm.
So we really have to sit down and we have to say, where are we being intelligent with our carbon savings and where are we fundamentally being penny wise, pound foolish? So the two examples I like on this are flotation tanks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Fund, yeah.
We know this one. We know the story. And yeah, I've been complicit in this argument too. Um, the story goes many years ago, some really smart Finnish engineers, I won't name them, but I do know them, and they are very smart gentlemen, found that, built a new mechanism and found out it saved some power. So they used it, as you do, as a marketing technique. And to this day, what they did stuck, because every RFQ I've seen from an engineering company asks about flotation power and is it energy efficient. But it's a false economy, because that's the part of the circuit you want to be maximizing recovery. And it doesn't use that much energy anyway. It's a mixer.
So I think everything for an entire series of rougher circuits, last time I did the math, was
Yep.
1.2 kilowatts per ton of ore.
Oh, I think it's less, but yeah, it's de minimis.
That was the number.
Yeah.
The optimization that people gave back to me was they could save zero point 0.2 kilowatts per ton of ore. Okay. So I, at one point, because I was a little bit of a jerk, said,
I think
okay, that
you
ore
were.
is worth, you were in the room actually.
I know I was.
They got angry at me. People got angry. I don't know why they got so
you,
angry.
you've made people angry. I can't believe that, Benjamin.
Well, I looked at the carbon footprint of zero point 0.2 kilowatts, which is all of a poofteenth. We're going to call it a poofteenth. And then I asked, how much does recovery go down by slowing down your equipment by 25%?
Yep.
And they were like, well, just a little tiny bit. And I think I did the math. It was grams. It was like you could afford to lose grams of copper per ton to pay for the carbon difference.
Yeah.
It was such a poofteenth on a poofteenth that fundamentally I said, well, what happens if you run it with 2 kilowatts of energy? What happens if you just fundamentally run this with maximum recovery in mind? And they
Yep.
kicked me out.
Yep. And before anyone gives us feedback and starts arguing about recovery and size, yes, we're well aware of that. Um, and the agitation and the energy you put in will change the recovery based on particle size. And I can argue that all day. I'd love to argue that all day. But as a general rule, I totally agree with Benjamin. Whatever it takes in that float circuit to maximize recovery, and if it's extra energy, so be it. That is not where we use energy. The comminution circuits is where we use the bulk of the energy, and then possibly your filtration, depending how they're set up and how fine you're going.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and on comminution circuits, we need to optimize the hydrocyclones. And we need
yes,
to optimize how many times we regrind stuff. We need to get rid of the bugs dust. We need to get rid of the ultrafines. We need to get rid of the slimes. We need to get rid of anything that's overdone. We need to focus very much on what is the right size grade curve for that material to maximize recovery.
yep,
Because let me give you an interesting perspective. Let's theoretically say that you ship a 8% lower concentrate grade because you've made the decision to pull all the sulfides out of your tailings dam. You're going to run the operation completely differently. That 8% sulfide turns into scope 3 emissions reduction. You get more savings because of all the energy attached to the sulfides from heat perspective in the smelter than you ever save by trying to mess with the comminution circuit. There's some really, really cool playback effects. But the problem that we have is we culturally give each of these people their little tiny mandate and their little tiny box. And we don't ask them to discuss the silos outside of their one little box.
yeah. And we get everyone doing really well, but misaligned KPIs, we're not focusing on the right thing. That is the overall prize, which is
Yeah.
kind of interesting. So just coming back before we change topic and go deeper in that, coming back to your cyclones, bypass was the word you were looking for to prevent overgrinding. And anyone who's interested, recently I ran a series of posts on LinkedIn. If you do a hashtag better classification, you'll find these. There was a lot of discussion talking about this very problem, talking about what we can do and how can we make classification better, because it really is an area of low hanging fruit where we can massively improve how operations run.
And I think you made a certain Asian screen salesman very, very, very happy because you made the clear argument that screens, and Derek screens in particular, have an incredible carbon footprint savings. Not because they reduce the energy versus a hydrocyclone, but because they make the classification so much better, they massively reduce the carbon footprint per ton of copper produced.
Agreed, but I'll add the caveat: in the right application. Once again, it's all about getting the right liberation, maximizing that liberation, and getting it in the right particle size range for whatever the downstream recovery is. And in some cases, screens do a wonderful job. In other cases, I think there's a case for persevering and using cyclones a bit differently. But anyway, we digress. We do digress. Cool. So we've talked a bit about carbon. Let's flip it. Let's flip carbon. I think you're all run out on carbon for now. Let's talk a little bit more about energy itself, because I think that's also a topic worth discussing, because not only does it affect, or can it affect, the carbon footprint of the mine, but it's definitely something we use a lot of. And being more efficient with how we use energy, not only has those longer term impacts, but also can save a lot of money.
So, from an energy perspective, I think there's two things that a mine needs to do to optimize natural capital. The first one is optimize their scope 2 emissions. How are they getting their energy? Okay. Batteries quoted from China are $65 a kilowatt with a 10,000 cycle guarantee. Okay. That's basically 1.2 cents a kilowatt to store energy overnight.
Wow. Have you got a comparison for that? So say 5 years ago, just as a ballpark?
400, 500.
Okay. So they've come a heck of a way.
When we were teaching this content in 2020,
Yep.
our comparison for a battery was 375 a kilowatt.
Okay.
And at that point, crushers and everything else beat lithium ion batteries once up one side, down the other.
Yep.
Today, lots of things just don't beat the battery. The battery has gotten so much cheaper. The cost of the battery has gone down 70, 80, 90% in the last 5 years.
Yep.
And that fundamentally means that a lot of the mine as a battery that we were promoting in 2020 no longer actually is competitive against just buying batteries.
Yeah. Okay.
So any mine in the world, I'm going to argue outside, and even in the Arctic, Rio Tinto proved the case in the Arctic because the cost of fuel to get in was so high, it was justifiable. Even in the Arctic, it makes sense to run solar plus batteries
Mm.
because the battery plus the solar is the cheapest form of electricity anywhere in the world. You can get steady state electricity for 6 to 8 cents a kilowatt, and every off-grid mine in the world at this point should just be buying the batteries, buying the solar, and replacing the diesel because diesel's
Yep.
45 cents. Then the delta T between 6 cents and 45 cents
Yep.
pays back in months. And by the way, if you want help with that, there's infinite number of both Danish and Finnish and other export credit agencies that will lovely give you the money. Some of them even have toilets that flush without leaks. Um,
That's a
sorry,
whole other story. That was in the last
it's a whole other
episode.
story.
Come on.
Yeah, we stay away from that. That's water.
Yes.
But my
Sorry, you
point
must be
is
in our silo today. We
scope
do get up.
two.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. The problem with natural capitals is not really siloed. You gotta be willing to cross boundaries.
That's what I was going to say. One of the problems with how we approach it at the moment is incredibly siloed. People seem to focus, to me, on one form of natural capital, and that's where they are, and that's all they want to talk about. Whereas there's a trade off around all of them, really.
Yeah,
But coming back to your battery and solar panel point of view, once again, you're not advocating this purely because there's less carbon reduction or anything. You are advocating this because efficiency has driven it so low that it is the cheapest form of energy.
I'm advocating it because diesel is that expensive off grid.
Yep.
It's not necessarily the cheapest source of energy. If you got BC hydro,
Yes.
It's not going to beat BC Hydro. If you got
No.
Quebec Hydro, it's not going to beat Quebec Hydro. If you're in the Maritimes in Canada, it's not going to beat the local power.
Yeah.
But if you're in Chile, in the Antofagasta, especially if you're running a smaller operation, it's going to beat it all day long.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a real alternative at this point, and an
Yeah,
economic alternative, not just a touchy-feely alternative,
yeah.
which is what I
So that's
like
the
about
first one. So
it.
scope two is very, very manageable. The
Yep.
second energy option that's manageable is figuring out how to optimize your scope, what your consumption of electricity and how you actually consume it. So there's two things to do. The first one is where do we get it from? Can we shift as much diesel off-grid power to solar as we can? Because the reality is there's about 2,000 off-grid mines roughly in the world.
Yep.
They're all tiny little things, 5,000 ton, 10,000 ton day operations. Some of them, we did a gold study once. There's a whole
Yep.
bunch of 1,200 ton day
There's
operations.
a lot of them.
And there's a
There
lot of them. And,
there's a
and
lot of those.
all of them can be serviced with 30 or 40 megawatts of a battery. They just they don't need they don't need 1,000 megawatts of battery. They need relatively small batteries. They
Yeah.
need roughly 4 containers of batteries to service a mine, 4 or 5 containers worth, which is just staggeringly small.
Yep.
So that's the first thing you want to do. You want to figure out how you're going to source your electricity. Then you want to go in and understand where are you consuming electricity where you're fundamentally costing recovery or costing value in use, and where are you consuming electricity and you're not going to cost those things. So I think it's very much important to switch your units from electricity consumption to electricity consumption per ton of metal produced or ounce of gold produced.
Yep.
Once you shift that metric, you're going to very quickly realize there's certain things that make complete sense. We are 100% believers in pump optimization.
Yep.
We believe in variable optimization like a religion. We believe in figuring out how to make trucks hybrid, for example. We believe in lots and lots of ways to reduce fundamental energy consumption or electricity consumption, but we want to make sure that when we do that, we're not fundamentally sacrificing recovery.
Yeah.
So I am someone who believes that if the mill is going to get me the perfect size curve to maximize recovery, I am not willing to give back a couple percentage points to go coarse. I'm not willing to give back the recovery it costs to do ore sorting. I am not willing to give back the recovery it costs to make sure that my concentrate trader doesn't have to have a complicated conversation with Sumitomo. There are decisions we're making around recovery that are just absolutely ludicrously environmentally silly because we're trying to protect sacred cows that fundamentally should be put on the altar and turned into really good barbecue.
Yes, we'll get some Argentinians involved. They know how to grow cows and barbecue.
I was
Um,
thinking more South African. I mean, let's be clear. I mean, South Africans, I think, have a much more mining style breed than an Argent. I mean, the Argentinians spend all day. South Africans get to it. I mean, let's be clear. We're
no,
not.
no, 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 no. When I lived in South Africa, I was involved in many braais, and I learned how to braai. And I think I understand why. Well, one, getting the coals right takes a long time, and then the meat's fantastic, but it also gives you several hours to drink while you're standing around prepping the coals. So I think there's more than one.
That's fair.
Yeah, one win out of
Okay,
that.
we're gonna force them to all eat biltong and just make it simple,
Yeah,
because
that works.
one must eat the sacred cow over time
Yes.
and preserved. On that note, let's move away from beef because clearly that has its own carbon footprint, which we are not discussing today. Let's talk
Yep.
about social capital. In our next episode, we're going to talk about how do we want to bring people into this? How do we have a conversation about the value of human capital? And how do we separate capital into classifications? Me and Ben, for all that everyone else hates it today, are strong proponents of DEI. We're strong proponents of diverse teams. We believe that social capital is one of the most important things the mining industry can build up. And we're going to talk about how, by maintaining strong social capital, you end up with better operations. And that's going to be the next episode.
I'm waiting for the National Guard to burst into your house at this point after that confession, since you live in Portland. But no, we're absolutely big fans of diversity. It makes for better everything. And we'll talk about that next week as part of our conversation around people being a major part of natural capital. Just a reminder, if you have questions, please send us a message. LinkedIn's always good. Start a conversation, start a discussion. We will get back. We want to answer people's questions around natural capital. And if you have any suggestions of people we should have on the podcast as we run out of things to say to each other, and if you're brave enough to come on and have a conversation, we would love that. So don't be strangers. Give us feedback. Tell us what you'd like to see. And we will see you next time on Natural Capital Conversations.